Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Popular Decks. I'm your host Michael and I'm here today with my favorite deck in the format. We are playing some Blue-Black Teachings. Before I get into the deck, I just want to remind you guys to hit the subscribe button below if you want to be alerted anytime I put up new videos on YouTube. And follow me on Twitter down there if you want to be alerted anytime I go live on stream, or if you want to see my tweets whenever I post new videos. I always shoot out a tweet and for each time I put out a new video or when I go live on Twitch. So that way you can find out about that stuff. And again, leave me any feedback in the comments section below. Let me know how I can improve my content. So onto the deck. So this is my my favorite deck. It was kind of I think it was the second deck I got. The first deck I started off in Pauper with was Acid Trip, just a nice cheap deck. Played some Acid Trip for a while, but this is kind of the first real deck I had. Acid Trip, not that great of a deck, but this deck is pretty good. And although it's a little worse now. So the whole point of the deck is to play all removal, counter spells, and card draw spells, and then eventually kill your opponent with like the minimum number of win conditions. So I'll start off with the win conditions. The main one for me in game one is this Curse of the Bloody Tome. So it mills your opponent 2 cards every turn. So with their draw each turn, that's 3 cards a turn, plus most decks run card draw other than the really aggressive decks. So this mills them pretty quickly. If you play this on turn 3, you can kill them, in like 20 turns. So pretty good pace. Actually, if you play it on turn 3, you do usually win by like turn 16 or 17. So that's a pretty fast clock for this deck. Then the other win condition is Evankar's Justice. So this deals 2 damage to each creature, and it has buyback, which is the important part, is the 2 damage to each creature. We can use this to wrath the board on turn 4 a lot of the time, or we can use it to wrath the board every turn if we get to the point of the game where we're paying 7 mana for it. But as far as being a win condition, so I would probably play this card even if that was all it did. And I can't tell if this makes it better or worse, but it does also deal 2 damage to each player. So sometimes you can't play this at all because it kills you. But on the other hand, this is the only real win condition that I play after Sideboard most of the time. So it deals 2 damage to each player as well. And the way that you gain enough life is by getting a Pristine Talisman out or 2. So you gain a life every turn, and then once you get up to, 15, 16 life a lot of the time, then you'll start playing the Justice every turn, and you're gaining 1 life a turn, and they're losing 2 every turn, so you can usually kill them from there. You do have to be a little careful sometimes against burn decks, or not just burn decks, but like Kudotha Boros. Any of the decks that have burn in them, you have to get a little bit higher before you start burning them out. And that's about it for win conditions and stuff like that. Let's get to some of the spells. So this deck, one of the benefits of being a creatureless deck is you can play Innocent Blood. So it's basically a 1 mana Cruel Edict in this deck. I don't have any creatures main deck at all, and you do get to, it's sorcery speed, you get to force your opponent to sacrifice a creature. It's great. I have more 1 mana removal than I would normally have in this deck, but Stompy has been kind of pretty popular. So some of you guys might have noticed that Stompy is a popular deck right now. So I've got 3 Disfigures. I used to only play 1 Disfigure, which is crazy. It was like just a tutor target, but now I'm up to 3. Gotta draw some of them naturally. And then to finish out the removal, I've got a couple of bullets that you can grab with Mystical Teachings. I've got Devour Flesh. The reason I play Devour Flesh is their life total never matters, and post-board I do bring in some creatures, and I would rather sacrifice my own creature if I need to with Devour Flesh to gain some life. I've never had it come up where my opponent's life total mattered, so Devour Flesh is not something that I don't really need this to be a Diabolic Edict. I'd rather have it be a Devour Flesh. Got 1 Doomblade, a lot of times for Atog and like other affinity creatures, kill them with Doomblade. Got an Agony Warp. You can usually, like, sometimes it's really good against like a Delver, like 2 Delvers or something. You can fog 1 Delver and kill the other one, stuff like that. Also it kills that it also kills the Guardian of the Guild Pact or whatever, the one that has protection from monocolored. You can kill it with an Agony Warp because it's just a 2/3. I've got 2 copies of Echoing Decay. This is a concession to Burning Tree Emissary. Normally I'd only have 1 of these, but I've seen a lot of elves, there's a lot of Stompy around, so running some Echoing Decays, and then finally we've got Chainer's Edict. It's efficient, sort of, but it's like good value. The flashback is like no problem in this deck. This deck plays a billion million lands. We've got 23 lands, and we've got all the full 4 bounce lands and stuff. So that's that. As far as counterspells go, I do have one of Deprive. I like to keep this in my deck because one way that we can lose to a lot of decks is Capsize. Like a lot of the Tron decks, the way you would actually lose to them is Capsize. And Deprive means you can pick up the land that they're trying to capsize and they can't do anything about it. Even if they counter Deprive, their Capsize is countered. 4 copies of Counterspell, 4 copies of Think Twice. These are the only 4 ofs in the deck. I got 1 Prohibit and 1... This is basically an Essence Scatter for those of you who didn't play a long time ago. It's just an old Remove Soul Essence Scatter variant, but I like this one's kind of cool because old school. And then I've got 2 Excludes, sweet value against creatures. I got a couple then interesting tutor targets for the Mystical Teachings. We've got Capsize, you can lock somebody out of the game, bounce all their lands to their hand. It's no problem to get up to 12 mana in this deck a lot of the time to double Capsize in a turn, so they run out of lands eventually. Got a Crypt Incursion, really good against decks that are trying to kill you with damage, and it's pretty good against Tron if you can hit some of their stuff. They've got, you know, they got the Haunted Fengraphs and the Pulse and Marasas and stuff, so you can Crypt Incursion their guys away. Then I got 1 Repeal, just takes care of random problem permanents. I can't really think of any off the top of my head that are that amazing, but like if I want to pick off a token from, it's like a token from Boggles, like if they have a Colony Garden token or a Cartouche token, and then you want to pick that off and then Edict away their creature, that sort of thing. Affinity, Germ tokens is nice to pick off too, but it makes you have outs to all kinds of things. You can pick up your own Pristine Talisman if someone tries to kill it, stuff like that. It's just a really versatile spell. And the sideboard just got a lot of 2 ofs and a couple other random things. So got 2 copies of Dispel, 2 copies of Hydroblast. Those are kind of self-explanatory. Some Duresses for the control decks and stuff like that. 2 relics, mostly for Tron, blue-black. The blue-black Flicker deck I also bring these in against, so the Reaping the Graves are garbage. Got 1 Augur Bolas. I had an extra slot in here because I used to play a second Curse of the Bloody Tome, but I was basically never ever bringing that in, so I switched this to an Augur. We'll see how it plays. It was pretty good for me, the one league I played with it, so I might consider going up to more of those at this point, but not yet. Got 1 more Echoing Decay for all the creature decks, some Shrivels for the go-wide small decks. What's nice about Shrivel is like we can, in this deck since we have Capsize and Repeal, I can bounce the enchantments that pump creatures' toughness, and then I can kill everything with Shrivel again. Got Deep Analysis for the control deck, control matchups, and then 2 Anglers. They're mostly in here for burn, but sometimes I bring them in against other stuff too. They're such a fast clock for burn, and they require 2 removal spells to kill, and really don't want to use Curse against a deck that probably has Pyroblast, and I don't want to use Evankar's Justice against burn, obviously, so that's why I bring in the Anglers against them. That is pretty much the deck. As far as the lands go, not too much interesting. I've got 2 Radiant Fountains and a Bojuka Bog as far as the kind of flex land slots in this deck. Otherwise, pretty standard mana base for this deck. I believe that is all. So you guys will get to see me pilot my favorite deck. I don't think it's super well positioned right now, though I have been doing pretty well with it. I've been able to dodge Stompy a lot. Stompy is traditionally not a very good matchup for this deck, so I wouldn't necessarily advise playing it right now. And it will warn you right now that it's very likely that I'll time somebody out in this round. So these are going to be some long matches. I almost always beat Tron by timing them out with this deck, because it just takes them so long to win. Tapping the lands takes forever. So unfortunately, that's like the reality of the situation. The last league I played with this, I went 4-1 and I timed out 2 people. So that's just gonna happen probably. But you got to play fast to play this deck. You got to play fast when you play against it, and that's just what happens. So with that, I will see you guys in the games.